Hello, Canucks fans. Welcome into episode 157 of the Canucks Speakeasy podcast. I'm Pete.
And I'm Doug.
And we got no Brendan again this week, but we do have a 3-game flight. So, Doug, take it away.
After coming off what was probably the Canucks' most disappointing loss to the New Jersey Devils, you and I were both in attendance for this game, Pete. The Canucks came away with a 2-0 victory over the Minnesota Wild. Theodore Bluger and Nils Höglander each with the goals for the Canucks.
Canucks followed up that game against Minnesota with another strong effort, this time against Carolina, coming out flying in the first and actually outshooting the Canes at one point, 13-2. Canucks win 4-3. Pettersson with 3 points. Lafferty and Mikheyev with a goal and an assist. Nice to see that from that line. A bunch of other guys on the score sheet and a very solid effort from the Canucks.
The Canucks continued their winning ways against Tampa Bay with a 4-1 victory. Brock Besser scored a natural hat trick while Quinn Hughes had 3 assists, and the much maligned Andrei Kuzmenko finally got off the schneid with a goal.
Hey, we get the all-win flight. I don't think we've had one of those since the start of the season, but I think that's our third one of the year maybe now.
Yeah, I think it was maybe the second week of the year. No, it wasn't the second episode of the year. Maybe it was the third episode of the year we had an all-win flight. Yeah, great. It's great to see the Canucks after that disappointing loss to the Devils kind of rebound and get back on track here against 3 tough opponents.
Yeah, we got a ton of stuff to get into on this episode. I'm looking forward to this one. Like, it's we've been doing this podcast. This is our 5th season, and it's fun to actually be talking about the team when they're playing well. Like there's been so many episodes over the past 150 or so, or whatever we're at, that I spend more time looking at cap friendly than anything else. It's like, how are the Canucks going to get out of this mess? And that hasn't been the case. Like, I still have a tab open here for cap friendly, but aren't using it that much right now. Or actually, it's great to just talk about the team, and it's great to see the team bounce back here and playing well. So I'm looking forward to this one, Doug.
Yeah, and obviously, the significant player behind you, Pete, we'll talk about him and his career as a Canuck, and I don't think we're going to get into the debate whether or not his number should be retired or he should be in the Ring of Honor. At the end of the day, he's being honored by this franchise, and I think that's all that matters. But yeah, man, it's nice to be good again. You know what I mean? It's just since, like you said, Pete, this is our 5th season doing this podcast, and outside of the bubble, we've never really had any positive to talk about with this team. As far as winning, sure, there was positive individual efforts. Petey getting over 100 points last year. Kuz, Petey, and I believe Miller all scoring over 40 goals last year. But not like this, not with the team actually winning meaningful games.
It's yeah, man, I'm still getting used to it, as opposed to dissecting what trade is going to happen or anything else here. It's been a lot of fun. Folks, you can follow us online on Twitter. I'm at Pete_Guests. The podcast is at Canucks Speak.
You can give me a follow on Twitter at Doug Then. And be sure to check out our playlist on Spotify and Apple Music. It's the Canucks Speakeasy outro playlist. Another funky jam is going to be getting added to the playlist at the end of this episode.
And Brendan's off this week. You can follow him on Twitter, Jabo_Vancouver. And also this year we are on YouTube, so you can see our lovely faces. Give us likes, follows. We appreciate it. Just another place to get some content out there for all you Canucks fans. All right. Doug, let's start with the game last night. So we're recording on Wednesday, the 13th, according to my advent calendar, I think it is. So day after the Canucks finally end their slide against Tampa, having lost 7 in a row against the Lightning, including one in Game 4 of the season earlier this year. Solid effort, man. Like, Canucks got down early. I was super impressed with this game, though. Not just because of Brock Besser and not just because Kuzmenko's getting a goal. Anytime Tampa had the puck, there were Canucks all over them. Rick Tocchet talks about relentless forecheck. That game was a poster child for relentless forecheck, and I absolutely loved it.
Yeah, I would say it's arguably the Canucks' most complete game of the season. The first 5 minutes, they weren't great. Obviously, they gave up that goal. But I also think Demko, we didn't really mention him during the game flight, but he made some really big saves to keep it a 1-goal game. And like you said, that relentless forecheck from this Canucks team, they just pushed back, and Tampa looked very lackadaisical. I know Kucherov was kept off the scoreboard. He did look dangerous when he had the puck on his net, but I think the reads from the defenseman and Demko were solid. It was like they knew exactly where he was trying to go with the puck, and it was just an overall team effort. And you love to see that, right? I think, that collapse against the Devils so late was probably a low for the season, like the lowest of the low outside of that Philly game, which might have been their worst overall effort from beginning of the game to the end of the game. But to see this response, the Wild, who were coming in with, I think, a 4 or 5 game winning streak because they had recently fired their head coach and they were on a bit of a run. Carolina, who I know has been struggling, and they had a players only meeting immediately after the game against the Canucks on Saturday night, but they're still a really good team. I know they've had some injuries and some goaltending issues, but they're still a really good team top to bottom, and arguably one of Petey's best games of the year, at least in the last month or so. And then Tampa Bay, a 3-time Stanley Cup champion. That was a really good effort from beginning to end. And I think it just goes to show the commitment that this team has. And you hear it from Tocchet often post game when he says, hey, a lot of these guys are calling out what they did wrong. The coaching staff, me, Footy, Gonchar, we're not even having to mention it to these guys. They know that they haven't been playing the system properly, and they're looking to correct that. And that's leadership, and that's buy-in to what Tocchet and the rest of the coaching staff are selling.
I'm loving these post-game pressers from Tocchet. I do really think he's pushing a lot of the right buttons, and he's letting the players really take a lot of the lead with it. I think it's fantastic. You mentioned Demko in there. Solid positioning. That's something I've really noticed from Demko is playing down, playing on his knees a lot of the time. The puck's hitting him right in the crest, and that's great for rebound control as well. That's something that in the past Canucks have been very guilty of with defensive coverage. So if you're not even giving that, that's a big bonus. One shot in there, but Demko has been fantastic. I really do think as well, the Canucks had a brutal stretch of a schedule there for about 3 or 4 weeks there. It was tough. A lot of 7-11 and 4-6 and back-to-backs. Like, it was a really tough part of the schedule, and they went 500 through it, which, you know what? I would have taken that at the start of the year. Now that they're being at home more often than not over the last couple of weeks, I do think that the team having the ability to have rest, the staff giving them some off days, just kind of getting themselves back together. I think you're really seeing this team kind of playing more to the level that they were during that hot start, with the exception of that Philly game that you mentioned. I think for me, I like it. Just feels like there's a lot more of that, and we're in what, game 30 now. We still haven't seen the Canucks play a game with their top 6 defensemen and their top 4 centers yet. We still haven't seen that. Suter's not back yet. Zadorov is now in the fold, but Soucy's out. So that's another promising thing right now. And it's just, it's nice to see this. This is a stretch where you look at it. It's like, okay, tough games. Carolina and Tampa. I don't care how they're playing in Minnesota, like you said, coming in hot. Those are tough games. And the Canucks get 6 points against those 3 teams. That's huge. And I do think that just the way that they're playing, I'm a little, I still don't like, except for the Carolina game, I don't like how they get off these slow starts. Like that Minnesota game, one point, I think shots were 10-0 in that game. I don't like some of these slower starts that are happening. But second and third period in all 3 of those games, they owned the opposition. They were by far and away the better team in all 3 of those for the last 2 periods of each of those games.
Yeah, and I believe the Canucks are 17-0 when having the lead heading into the third period of games this year, which is great.
Yeah, that's huge.
I believe, yeah, they, every time they've had the lead going into the third period, they've ended up closing out the game. And you're right, most of the games that the Canucks have lost or have not looked good, it's been slow starts. But they've always, even that, I've harkened back to that Jersey game again, but they did have a really big push and it made a comeback. It was 5-2 heading into the third period. And, they got it. They tied the game up, which was great. It was just giving up that goal late. And seeing that the way this team is able to finish games. And last year, that was a huge issue. Last year was almost the opposite, where if you remember, this team would actually jump out to a 2-goal lead or a three
Oh
goal
yeah,
lead, even, and then cough it up into the third period.
in
And,
record
they had
fashion.
exactly, they had so many late game losses or, third period collapses. And this year it's kind of the opposite, which is good. They're more of a closing team, which is amazing. And right now, I think Peace Suter has been practicing. Talkett last night, I think, was asked about Peace Suter, and he said he wants to get him more practice reps before putting him back in the lineup. But, he is going to get him back in the lineup, which is good. So we might see him before the end of the year here, possibly on the road trip they're about to embark on. And with Carson Soucy, I think Soucy, you're probably looking mid to late January, more than likely will be when he gets back on the ice. But hopefully, once they've got a full, healthy group, I really do wonder what this team's going to look like and how well they're going to play. And, does Blueger stay on that third line? He's had chemistry with Dakota Joshua and Connor Garland, or does he get bumped down to the fourth line and Soucy goes back there? Because Soucy as well was having success with those two wingers.
Yeah, he was. I quite liked what I was seeing from Carson Soucy. Something else that post game came out last night. I don't know. You probably caught this. You catch Braden Point's comments out there about the Canucks?
No, I heard it referenced, but I didn't actually hear what he said.
All right, I got it. I got it right here for you. This is from Kevin Woodley's Twitter account. He's complimentary of Vancouver. They're explosive offensively and they're a deep team. They don't give you a whole lot. They got a lot of guys that can skate, a lot of guys that can check. They work hard and they got a great goaltender too. So they're a pretty complete team. I mean, you hear a guy like Braden Point, Stanley Cup champion, saying that in the past, you would just not even assume it's about Vancouver. It's one game that, well, they've played us twice now, I guess, actually. Sorry, it's 2 games, but it's just nice to see that. And I do think he's right with everything in there with the way they played last night. I said it at the start, just that forecheck, man, that relentless forecheck. The Canucks were all over them. Special nods out to Sam Lafferty, who I thought was excellent with that. And my boy Niels Hoglander, man, like, geez, he has been so freaking good lately with everything. He's fit in really nicely in that line now with Miller and Besser, which I know is something that we talked about before about wanting that to happen. And Besser's a whole other story, tied for the league lead in goals. He's showing no signs of cooling off. One of 5 players this year to have multiple hat tricks already this year. Only 5 guys have done that. But man, Niels Hoglander, what he's doing, forechecking, still not perfect out there by any stretch, but what we're seeing from him, again, you need guys like this to really excel. You need some found money guys out there, which we have as well, with whether it's Di Giuseppe or whether you can call Lafferty that, I don't know, or even what Noah Julesen's been doing a little bit in the bottom pairing on the D. I mean, he's again not a game breaker, and I don't think he's a long-term fit, but he led the team in hits last night against Tampa, and he's out there a lot killing penalties. So you get a lot of these guys, a lot of these depth players, but what I was really being impressed with is the way they're going out there, relentless pressure on the opposition, keeping the pucks on the perimeter, and then hitting. There was another series. Sorry, I know I'm kind of like rambling all over the place, but I'm really excited about that game last night. There was another series. I think it was in the third period, might have been the second. I don't know. I was drinking sake during the game. And there was a shift where Ian Cole goes out there and levels a guy, goes to the bench, hops over. Zadorov comes out, levels a guy. Like, hard hitting blue line. When did the Canucks had that? We've had a lot of marshmallows over the years, but the Canucks are finishing hits, and that's something else that goes a long way. Not only are they relentless, but they're finishing hits. And if you're the opposition, you got to keep your head in the swivel, because the guy's coming at you. He's all over you, but he's also going for the puck, and it makes things very difficult for opposition teams coming into our barn when they're doing that and guys are hitting. Man, Zadorov can hit, though. He's thrown a couple since he's come over. I like it a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the one thing he has over Tyler Myers, because I know there's a lot of comparisons about him and Tyler Myers when the puck is on their stick. But the one difference is Zadorov is a lot more physical of a player than Tyler Myers. But I agree with you. I think the physicality of this team, and even, going back to a guy like Nils Hoglander, who's not the biggest guy whatsoever, but he's a very physical player. He will, I mean, I think twice in the post game last night from Talk It, he mentioned the hit that Hoglander had. I believe it was on Kucherov. He mentioned it twice. You know what I mean? And yes, he was critical of him of a couple little defensive mistakes he made. But, guys like him, guys like Petey, who you don't think of as a big hitter, but Petey, we've seen him a couple of times this year kind of lay a big check. And you like that, right? You don't need the biggest guys to come up and, like, sure, Zadorov adding him to the roster is great, but when you're getting that from everybody, Miller, is a physical player. Phil DiGiuseppe is a physical player. Obviously, Dakota Joshua, that's what makes this team so hard to play against for a lot of these opponents, is that they're quick on the forecheck. I mean, even Kuzmenko last night, I think he had a back check and stole the puck away from Braden Point, which was great. And I think that's what Talkett and the coaching staff want to see from him, is just that effort of skating back and, making the effort, be hard on the forecheck, skate back and try to take your man and get the puck back if you've coughed it up. And we're starting to see that with Kuzmenko. We're starting to see, guys like Hoglander get rewarded for their strong play early in the season and being elevated not only to the second line, but also to the second unit power play, which is great. And, I also look at a guy, and I know Rutherford did a bunch of media hits today. And one of I don't know if it was Donnie and Dolly that asked him, or if it was Sat and Dan Riccio that asked him, but someone asked him about Podkolzin down in Abbotsford. And he said, and I liked his response. He said, look, we're not going to rush Podkolzin until we think he's ready and he's fully confident to come back to the team. Obviously, it's nice to see him, come back from that really, dangerous hit that he suffered earlier in the year and be productive again. But we don't want to rush him. And, I think Rutherford took a bit of a shot at the old regime by saying, one of the reasons why Hoglander struggled the last couple of years is because he was rushed to the NHL. He should have spent a couple of years in the AHL. And last year's the perfect example where he spent the majority of the year down in the AHL. And we're seeing the fruits of that labor. And hopefully we can see that with Podkolzin and, when this team, and I do think they're a playoff team. I'm not afraid to admit that I think this team is a playoff team. When the playoffs come, I do wonder if they're going to paper Podkolzin over to the big club so they can have him come playoff time if they need him, because he's another guy who, I think could play very well on your third or fourth line and be hard on the forecheck.
Yeah, I caught those comments as well. And, this is something obviously I've been a big advocate for a long time is letting your prospects cook. And the Canucks have a history of not doing that, of rushing guys. So right now you don't need Podkolzin. So give him all the ice time. Get him working under Jeremy Colleton. Get him learning systems. Get him improving his game. There may be a spot for him down the line. Abby's also going to go into the playoffs, it looks like. So there's going to be lots of playing time for him. It's great to see. You also mentioned earlier, you mentioned Dakota Joshua. Joshua had a shift towards the end of the game there where he was down forecheck and just kept the puck on the boards relentlessly. Like he had like two lightning on him and he was just doing everything he could to suck the clock down. Incredible shift. And this is I know we talked about this a couple of times in the past, but a guy who was a bit in the doghouse to start training camp. He was a guy that looked like Talkett was a little unimpressed with how he showed up. But man, he's been good. Like this is a guy who's just, again, like this is something just overall right now that we haven't seen a lot of in the past, is useful players towards the bottom of your lineup. And we can have guys like, I mean, right now, obviously Lafferty and Hoglander are up, but they've also been down. And, guys like Kuzmenko and DiGiuseppe go down into the bottom six. It's really fantastic to see all this depth coming about right now, because, man, like, the days of like the Megmas and Chapoos and all these other guys, it looks to be
Lyndon
over.
Vey.
Oh man, Lyndon Vey, another second round pick we traded away for Lyndon Vey. I was excited about that move, I gotta admit, but
I was too.
That didn't work out. But it's just it's nice when you keep an eye on Abbotsford and you can see some of these guys. And I know people are saying, you talk about Puck Coles and Arshdeep Baines is another guy, Christian Wolanin. Hey, it's great that these guys are playing and you can call up guys and they can have an impact. I mean, Neil Zaman is a classic example of that. Neil Zaman basically was the final push that needed for the Canucks to get rid of Anthony Beauvillier. And I mean, it was again the right opportunity came up with the Beauvillier trade, but Oman was ready and he's up with the club now. Again, was there how long term or whatever? I don't know, but he's been very useful coming up and playing his role on the fourth line. Again, another depth piece and a guy who shows that if you're even though he played a lot of last year, starts the season down, works hard, gets the call up, and now he's here to stay. So having a stable farm team is something else that we haven't had, and is a sign of a healthier organization. And look, I'm not saying the Canucks are where they need to be with all this stuff. We got a lot of our top prospects not playing in Abbotsford right now for various reasons, but there are other prospects as well. So it's just right now, it's very exciting to see this tree, right? You got the big squad, you got the Abbey squad, and then you got the other prospects. It's way better than it was a year ago, 2 years ago. Like it's on the right track. I just ask that you don't trade your first round pick unless you have multiple, like in the Hronik deal. I'm not angry about the Hronik deal, but I want to keep seeing them fill up the pipeline with more and more. But yeah, man, it's just great to see when guys come up, being able to have that impact. And I mean, Noah Yulson is another guy who came back up, and the Canucks had a couple other guys go through on the blue line. But having those guys who can come up and fit in instantly, that's the Pod Colson that we'll see next time he comes up, I hope.
Yeah, and you mentioned the two Abbey guys, Neil Zaman and Noah Juleson, and the Canucks PK has looked a lot better these last 3 games. And those two players have arguably been their two best penalty killers in these
Mm-hmm.
last 3 games. Oman, I believe, has led all forwards in penalty kill time on ice, and Noah Juleson is a shot blocking machine. And it's nice to see that organizational depth. Now, is that the depth you're going to want heading into the playoffs to go for a long Stanley Cup run? Yeah, there's a debate there. You probably want to add. I know one of the big news topics this past week was the Canucks are officially out on the Ethan Bear sweepstakes, and it sounds like he's going to be heading east to the Washington Capitals, or should I say the Virginia Capitals? But
Yeah.
that hasn't been confirmed quite yet, but it sounds like, yeah, the Canucks are out. But it also sounds like the Canucks are still looking to add more depth to the blue line, which I definitely think is probably their weakest positional need at the moment is defensive depth, especially on the right side. But to have these guys come up from Abbotsford and to contribute and to actually, help this team win. And yeah, I was not liking Noah Juleson's game earlier in the year, and I was very frustrated with the way he was playing, but he's found his stride and he's looked really good. And he has not looked out of place. And you always say this, Pete, the best compliment you can give a player like a Noah Juleson is you don't
Yeah.
notice him. And I
Yeah.
have not noticed him the last 3 games. And I think, the PK as well has been a big part of that. He knows his role. He's got a defined role on the PK. And he's thriving right now. And I think being partnered with a guy like Ian Cole, and I know you and I and Brendan have all kind of mentioned how good of a signing Ian Cole has been. Sure, he's made mistakes here and there. Every player's going to, but just the calmness and the pedigree that Ian Cole has as a guy who's a multi Stanley Cup champion. He's played on Stanley Cup winning team in Pittsburgh, Tampa. It's just nice to see a guy like him come in and kind of calm this locker room down and play with such poise in the back end.
Yeah, a couple of things in there. Neil Zaman, you're right. He does lead the all Canucks forwards in average ice time on the PK right now, per game, averaging 1 minute 51 seconds. That's 6 seconds more than Petey and 10 seconds more than Miller. So again, you're getting some great use out of him. Ian Cole leads the entire team in penalty killing time a game. Sorry. It's interesting. The top 3 guys right now for the Canucks are all newer defensemen in terms of shorthanded time on ice. It's Ian Cole, Philip Hronik, and Nikita Zadorov. And you got to go all the way down to 14th on the team to find Quinn Hughes. And that's a big thing. That's helping to manage Quinn Hughes' load. He is getting some PK time, but every other defenseman is getting more than him. Noah Juulsen averaging 133. Now, here's an interesting stat with Juulsen. He's played 18 games with the Canucks, but you look at some of his deeper stats. He's got 47 hits and 26 blocked shots. Over 18 games, that's pretty good. The 47 hits puts him actually third on the team right now. The 26 blocked shots puts him in a tie for sixth on the team with Carson Soucy and actually Elias Pettersson. Pretty good when you can get that out of a guy with that cap hit. Now, look, there were times that we were talking about Juulsen, and just like, that whole thing with the defenseman and not noticing them, that always goes back to me to the Tyler Myers thing, right? Like, Myers has had some stretches there where you don't talk about him. And then there's games like the Jersey game where you're just like, he was awful. And haven't talked too much about Myers. He hasn't been great, but that's the thing. Like, you don't want to see or really notice these guys. Juulsen, you don't really notice, and that's great. Myers still do out there sometimes. Myers, like we said earlier, he doesn't hit like Zadorov. So there's a lot of things about his game that you still kind of notice out there. But at the end of the day, if you're not talking about guys like on the blue line, these depth guys, they've done their job. And Juulsen right now playing well. Long-term fit, don't know. And again, though, you've got Soucy coming back. So all of a sudden, if you can have Juulsen and Myers battling for that 6-7 spot, that's a good problem to have. So again, like I said earlier, I haven't had a game yet with our true starting six because Zadorov was acquired while Soucy was out, or our starting four centers. So things to look forward to moving forward as well.
Yeah, I'd like I said, I do want to know how this team looks, when they're completely healthy. And I know, look, very few teams are ever completely healthy, but I do think having those four centers, Bluger, Miller, Petey, and Suter, I think that'll be a really big improvement. And not that Nils Aman's played bad. I think he's played really, really well. But the nice thing about a guy like Nils Aman, he can play the wing, he can play center, and having more guys that can take faceoffs as well is never a bad thing, right? If you got two guys who are strong in the faceoff circle and one guy gets waved out, you have another guy who can come in. It's a really, really good thing. And right now, I just think everything is clicking, right? This team seems, they had a bit of a struggle, but like you said, they played 7 games. I think it was in 12 nights, and they played 12 games in 18 days. 12 games in 18 days is a lot. And even Tocchet, again, going back to the post-game press conference from Tocchet last night, he mentioned how this homestand's been really good for the team. They've gotten more practice time. They've been able to rest, and they look a lot better. Yeah, there's still some slow starts, and I know Tocchet he seems very concerned about the too many men penalties that this team has been on.
I'm concerned too, man. 4 over the last 3 games.
And they're blatant. It's not like, oh, okay, the guy was jumped off. Like, it's like, no, there's literally 6 skaters on the ice for like 8 seconds, before the opposing bench or the ref finally calls it. It's a little concerning. Yeah. So there's definitely some things that this team needs to tighten up in their game. But at the end of the day, they're coming away with wins, and that's all that matters. 2 points is 2 points.
Yeah, face-off percentage, Suter still leads his team, and Miller and Bluger second, third. Aman is fourth. All 4 of those guys are 50% or better. He is just under. He's 49.71, but still very big improvement to have PD at 49.7 on the face-offs. I'd take that. So your 5 centers that you've used are your top 5 face-off guys this year. It's good to see. Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to as well seeing what happens. Aman, like you mentioned, can play the wing. The Canucks have had a few other cast of forwards who've come in, but it's depth. It's going to be interesting to see as the season goes on, like what they do. I do think, like you, that they're in the market for defensemen. My thoughts on Ethan Bear, like I like Ethan Bear. I like the person Ethan Bear. I just don't really remember a lot of times being wowed by Ethan Bear last year. Like I would have been okay with the Canucks bringing him back, but I'm not calling this like a travesty or anything that we don't have Ethan Bear back in the fold. It's not the end of the world, in my opinion. The thing with Ethan Bear is there was no acquisition cost, right? It's just cap space. So
Yeah.
if you're going other avenues, especially as you get towards the deadline, we'll see if they do anything, but maybe this isn't the year to do it. Maybe this isn't the year to go and trade. Please don't trade any more second round picks for anyone. But maybe not this year. Maybe you address more of it through free agency. And I know I said I haven't been looking at cap friendly a lot, but we know that the Canucks have a lot of defensemen who are free agents after this year. So that's something else to think about down the road. And part of the idea why they brought in Zadorov is because they are going to make a push to re-sign him, and it gives you that extra window.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point regarding Ethan Bear. Like, he's not a guy that wows you. I know his underlining metrics are really good. But yeah, like it sounds like one of the defining factors of why, and again, nothing's official, but all the reports are that he's going to end up signing with the Washington Capitals is because not only were they going to give him a little bit more money than I think what the Canucks were offering, but they're apparently willing to give him term. So I think it's a 2-year deal is what it sounds like. And I don't think the Canucks were prepared to commit themselves to Ethan Bear for 2 years. And I get that Ethan Bear is looking out for his family. He's got a young family, and there's no issues with him doing that, especially coming off the injury that he did. I agree. The acquisition cost was just money, which is free. Interesting enough, there was actually a report from Rick Dollywall that when he had said that they were out on Ethan Bear, another guy that apparently the Canucks have been checking in on, former Canuck, Jalen Chatfield, who was just in town with the Carolina Hurricanes. I can't imagine Chatfield would cost too much to acquire, but he's carved out a really nice role in a bottom pairing for the Carolina Hurricanes. And the Hurricanes right now are struggling. I'm not sure what his contract status is, if he's a UFA at the end of the year or RFA. But that's an interesting name. I do think they are going to try to still move some salary. I would imagine if they can find someone to take Connor Garland's contract, I doubt they're going to be able to. But if they could, I mean, even today, I don't know if you saw the comments from Rutherford about Tyler Myers. He mentioned that, they're in no rush to make that decision, but they're going to do whatever they think they need to do to make this team better, essentially, is what he said. And so Tyler Myers could also be getting moved potentially. I'm not saying he will, but they're not closing any of those avenues to try to improve this team. And the one thing since Alvin and Rutherford have taken over, they've been very aggressive, especially on the trade market. And I believe Frank Saravelli said right now his GM of the year is Patrick Alvin. Just the turnaround this team's had, and all the moves, the shrewd moves he's made, by being able to move, to pull off the Horvat trade, took some pretty, it was a pretty big risk, and they got a good return. Then you acquire Hronek, and then you turn parts of that into Zadorov essentially, and you don't have to retain any money. It's just it's a really, really good move. And right now I do wonder what this team is going to do as far as add to this team, because I do think so. I don't think they're going to trade a first round pick, despite what people on Twitter are saying. I would like them not to trade a second round pick if that's at all possible, but I do think they are going to try to insulate this team and bring in another big time, not big time, but a significant player to this group.
Well, we don't have a second this year as it is. We don't have thirds the next 2 years after that, but we actually have right now 2025 and 2026 second rounder. I really hope that we hang on to those. Yeah. And I just wanted to touch, going way back to what you mentioned, the Virginia Capitals as well. I don't know if you've ever been to DC, but DC is a weird little enclave between Virginia and Maryland, and like both airports for Washington are actually in Virginia. But you just look across the water from DC when you're down at the water, you're looking at Virginia, and there's Arlington, Virginia right there. It's got its skyline. It's kind of like if you're in New York and you look across at Jersey. But I don't quite understand the reasoning for them to want to move out of central DC to Virginia. But All the best to Ethan Bear going out that way. Again, I like the player, I like his story, but I just, I'm not sure he's the needle mover that the Canucks need. I know some people, like you said, analytics, this and that. I think too many people drown themselves in analytics. I watched him play, and he was fine, but I don't think he moves the needle as much as I'd like to. Doug, can we talk about Bobby Lou?
Yeah, please.
Ring of Honor tomorrow night. Gonna be at the game. Get to do Lou one more time. This is a guy for me who is one of the more beloved Canucks of all time. Is just such a character. What the greatest goalie this team has ever seen. He owns all the team records. It's going to be really nice to give him that honor, to see him one more time and to relive a little bit of those glory days. Dude got robbed of a Vezina. He should have been the Canucks Vezina winning goalie, but got robbed.
Yeah. So here's a question for you, Pete. I was thinking about this the other day. Who is the greatest Canadian-born player to ever put on a Canucks jersey or to play for the Canucks?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. I know
It's,
right away, obviously, with what we're talking about. Luongo's right there.
I mean, I know goalies are a little bit different than, forwards, defensemen, but the
Oh, they are
three that
different.
come to
All
my
right.
mind, the, the three that come to my mind off the top of my head are obviously Trevor Linden, Ed
Mm-hmm.
Jovanovski, Roberto Luongo.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Hmm.
I'm trying to think like who are outside of those guys? Like those are the three. And to me, only one of them's a Hall of Famer. One of them, like you said, should have won the Vezina Trophy. I think Roberto Luongo is the greatest Canadian born player to ever play for the Canucks.
I mean, Stan Smeal got to get a nod in there too. Tony Tanti, Richard Brodeur. But I mean, Linden is the only one who could come close to Luongo. I think it's got to be Luongo. I mean, Jovo. How many? Like he was good, but how many? How long was he a Canuck? If I remember, I can't remember. Oh, there we go. I found Jovo. Yeah, 37th on the Canucks all time in scoring. Jovo.
For
BX is
defensemen
ahead of
as
him.
well.
Well, BX is ahead of him as well. Like 37th among everyone, like forwards and defensemen. But yeah, I don't know. I think for me, my top three, I'd probably have to go Linden, Smeal, and Luongo. But I mean, it's tough. All three of them were captains, right?
Yeah, no, that's well, yeah.
It's true though. But those would probably be my top three. It would be Linden, Smeal, and Luongo. But yeah, it's hard not to say Luongo and what he did for the team. I have to think about it more, but I think it probably would be Luongo.
Well, there's only one that's a Hall of Famer, right? That played their significant the peak of their career with the Canucks. Like you could argue, oh, well, Cam Neely's a Hall of Famer. Well, yeah, but Neely didn't become Neely until he went to Boston. You know what I
Matt
mean?
Sundin, Mark Messier were stacked, man.
Okay, Messier, I guess, yeah. I mean, and you know what's funny actually is I believe this is the 11th episode of the year. So I guess
Oh yeah, so it is.
technically, Messier technically, I guess, would be as far as like their career achievements. But I mean, like the pinnacle, they played their prime years as a Canuck. It's Roberto Luongo. Stan Smeal, I know he's a folk hero in this city and for this franchise, but Stan Smeal, like he's not that guy. I'd put Tony Tanti above Stan Smeal, in my opinion.
Well, Smeal is fifth all time on the Canucks in scoring, and Tanti's eighth. Like Smeal had over 200 more points than Tanti, but he
But how
did
many
play
more
like 300 more
games?
games,
How
like
that's what I
350
mean,
more
right?
games. Tony Tanti was when I first started following the Canucks. Tony Tanti, I think, had that 45 goal season, and that was the record until Bure came along. Point per game wise, Tony Tanti for sure. But yeah, it's tough. It depends what you mean by great, right? Like what defines, like, is it just on the ice? Is it pure skill at the peak of his career? Is it their whole legacy? And of course that ties in with the number one in Vancouver as well because of Kirk Lane. But I still think, yeah, it's tough to not say Lou out of those. I mean, also gold medal winning goalie in that building, right? He
Yep.
was in net for the golden goal. So I know that's not the Canucks, but that's something that every Canadian remembers where they were for that one.
Well, and I'm sure Luongo really appreciates being able to play not only for a Canadian team, but to play in the city that the Olympics was being held in the year that he was the gold medal winning goalie. Like that had to mean a lot to him. I don't think it would have hit the same if he was still in Florida. You know what I mean? So I think that's a
Yeah, for
huge
sure.
achievement for him. Here's another question for you. And I know the debate, and I know earlier I said we're not going to talk about whether or not it should or shouldn't be retired. But here's the question. If the Canucks did end up winning the Stanley Cup in 2011, would Luongo's jersey be retired?
It's still a tough one because for me, number one is a dual number with the Canucks. And look, I know Luongo is the better goalie than Kirk McLean. However, Kirk McLean in '94, it was magical, and the save and how good he was. And I know different eras, yada yada yada. But the fact that McLean has stayed with the team and the organization and is a big member of the Canucks community, and Luongo basically said, I want to go back to Florida and left and joined the Panthers organization. That's for me, that plays a part of that whole story with the number one. Now, I mean, if the Canucks won the cup, I mean, who knows? It's maybe they would retire both, but they would have to do something to honor McLean with it. And I don't think McLean is quite retirement worthy, but I also think the Canucks, like, we have too many numbers retired, and we got this Ring of Honor as well. And like, I'm personally not crazy about the whole thing myself. Like, so like, I just think there's too much of that. Don't hate me, people. I just think that we never won a cup. And I did some looking. Like, I think that Buffalo, our expansion cousins, actually have more retired numbers than we do, if I remember. They got 7 or 8 now. So we're not the
Gilbert
only ones
Perreault,
who
right? Would
suffered with.
have to be one.
Yep, he's definitely one of them. But I can't remember
Hasek?
who else it was. Hasek's got to be in there.
Yeah.
Can't remember if they
LaFontaine,
did
maybe?
LaFontaine or Housley. I can't remember if those
Housley,
guys.
yeah.
Yeah, I really struggling to remember off the top of my head. There's a couple of random ones in there. I
Yeah,
think, but
I agree with you. For a franchise that's never won a Stanley Cup to have, I like the Ring of Honor. Don't get me wrong. Like, I don't want to poo poo it. I think it's a really nice thing to kind of honor those kind of folk hero players. You know what I mean? Guys like Matthias Oland, who up until Quinn Hughes was my favorite defenseman to ever play for the Vancouver Canucks. Um, obviously Harold Snaps, which was a little bit before my time, but he was like a folk hero in this for this city and for this team and that 83
mhm,
Stanley Cup run that the Canucks
82,
went on. 82, pardon me.
80,
That the 82, 83, technically, right?
no, 81, 82.
81, 82. Okay, perfect. So the year before I was born. Regardless. Um, so I do like that you can honor players like that. I still think, and I know a lot of Canuck fans are really, hot and bothered by this. I think Ryan Kessler deserves to be in the Ring of Honor. I don't give a shit what anyone says. If you're going to have Bure's number retired, which I'm not saying it shouldn't be, because it should, but the way he kind of like strong armed the team, if you got Luongo who strong armed the team, and the other thing with Luongo too, and I don't think this is on him, and I don't think it's fair, but I think some of the negative backlash maybe from ownership with Luongo is him retiring the way he did, and then the Canucks getting hit with that cap recapture penalty. I know a lot of people thought there could have been a creative way for the Canucks to kind of get out of that, whether or not they acquired the contract and then just put him in LTIR, or if he would have just gone on LTIR instead of saying he retired. Regardless, that's probably shitty ownership being shitty. I still think a guy like Ryan Kessler, and I know a lot of people are still mad about the way he left this organization. I think he absolutely deserves to be in the Ring of Honor.
Only Selke Trophy winner for the Canucks as well. The 8 numbers for the Sabres: Tim Horton, Rick Martin, almost Canucks Gilbert Brulot, Rene Robert, Pat LaFontaine, Danny Gare, former Canuck Ryan Miller, and Dominic Hasek. Those are your 8 Sabres with retired numbers. So we're not looking too bad with our 6 compared to that.
I didn't realize Tim Horton played for Buffalo, and I would have imagined it wouldn't have been that long, considering
Yeah,
I always
3
thought he
years.
played, and they retired his number after 3 years. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, apparently. Yeah, yeah.
All right.
So yeah. Hey, that's that Sabres would have only been in existence for like 4 or 5 years when they retired him. So, or when he stopped playing with them, I should say. I'm not sure when they retired it, but anyways, enough about Buffalo here. Doug, should we take this to the free pour?
Let's do it.
All right.
All right. And for my free pour, I actually wanted to talk about this album right here that came out this year. It's by Sufjan Stevens, and the album is called Javelin. Uh, Anybody who's a Sufjan Stevens fan knows what an incredible musician he is. He's kind of like a folk pop singer who has incredible instrumentation. This album is really special because it was dedicated to his partner who he lost this year. And then Sufjan Stevens has also been battling some kind of really rare and serious health issues. I know my fiance and I were big fans. I've seen him twice live. Incredible show. We were really hoping he would go on tour for this album. Unfortunately, that's not going to happen, at least not for the foreseeable future, as he's still struggling with his health issues. But one of my favorite albums to drop this year, Sufjan Stevens, Javelin. If you haven't given it a listen, you want like an amazing, grand folk pop record, please check it out.
Yeah, we'll check that out. That's I know the name and I've heard bits and pieces, but I can't say I've actually put on that album start to finish. You know what's funny is that anyone watching on YouTube, Doug got the visual prop, and my free pour is also using a record in a visual prop
Wow.
here. So I even put it over. Well, my virtual background is making this very tough to see. Let's there we go. Roberto Luongo's blocking it up. You want a little bit of something Christmassy and something a little bit different. It's a holiday soul party. Sharon Jones and the Dap Kings. Doug, I know years ago we saw Sharon Jones once at the Malkin Bowl and I slipped in the mud. That was a good old time. I've seen Sharon Jones a couple times. Amazing. R.I.P. I like to add a Christmas record every year to the collection, and I like to get some different ones in there. This is again one of those ones that you put on and you kind of forget it's a Christmas album until there's like a cover of something that comes along. But the covers are done really uniquely. There's some original stuff in there. I mean, Sharon Jones and the Dap Kings, just funky as hell. I got this over at Neptune Records, fantastic store. I know they got a bunch of copies up there. So if you're looking for a good Christmas record. Oh, one last thing, and we'll see if the the virtual background here blocks it. But bonus color vinyl. Look at this. Like candy
Oh,
cane.
cool.
Always fun. Like red and white vinyl, which I love it when you get a record and it's a surprise colored vinyl. So recommend that. Go to Neptune, grab yourself a good Christmas record. Sharon Jones and the Dap Kings. It's a holiday soul party. Thanks for tuning in, folks. Episode 157, just about in the books here. The all-win episode. So those are always the most fun to do. Got another fun week of games. Doug, I'll be seeing you tomorrow for the Canucks and some more Bobby Lou. But yeah, it's just been a fun week. So thanks everyone out there for joining us.
Yeah, you're not fun as far as wins and losses as I was eliminated from our fantasy football playoffs this week. Absolute disaster from my team. And it sucks because the guy I was playing, shout out to Craig, his team kind of shit the bed this week as well. But my team shit the bed a little bit harder than his. Ending my bid to make the playoffs. So congratulations, Pete. Good luck in the playoffs. And also to the people watching on YouTube and to the listeners, this was not pre-planned or prompt for me to grab my record and Pete to grab his. That was totally off the cuff. Great minds think alike. And yeah, I definitely am interested to check out that Sharon Jones record.
Yeah, you'd like. I'm kind of down with doing that more though. I kind of like that. Bring the music back in. Folks out there know we love music. We got the beats going, and this one as well will be added to the playlist that we have there, the Canucks Speakeasy Outro playlist. You check that out. You can also follow me on Twitter. I'm at Pete_Gas.
You can give me a follow on Twitter at Doug Venn. Be sure to follow the podcast on Twitter at Canucks Speak.
Also, Brendan AWOL this week, Jabo_Vancouver, and YouTube, which we mentioned a couple times. Give us that like and subscribe because we're new and we're trying.
As always, Thanks for listening.
Hasta luego.